Welcome to the Greenwood. I'm your host, Thaddeus Papke, and this is the podcast where we peek under the hood of the most famous outlaw who may have never been. From archers to archaeologists, we interview subject matter experts to learn why the figure of Robin Hood continues to endure and consider what we can learn by examining what is known as the matter of the Greenwood. Recently, a new member of our Discord community asked for some recommendations for Robin Hood novels. Over the course of our discussion, they mentioned being a fan of epic fantasies, and also of horror. They then joked about how there probably weren't any Robin Hood horror novels, though. And while there certainly aren't many, there are some. In episode 63 of the podcast, I mentioned the long-standing global popularity surrounding the idea of the social bandit. And if you take an idea that has almost a universal appeal, add some trademark elements, and some high-level name recognition, and you'll get a character who's bound to get adapted time and again. In fact, I'm hard-pressed to think of a genre in which one can't find some sort of Robin Hood adaptation. In regard to horror, it may be less common for Robin Hood than, say, fantasy, much less romance or historical fiction, but it's out there. I've read some short stories where Robin battles werewolves or even Dracula, a ghostly folk horror comic book, and there's a Robin Hood zombie movie that we'll eventually get to for the Splitting Arrows series. But especially with the interest in fantasy, the novel that came to mind was one called Shadow of the Wolf by Tim Hall. I was hesitant to recommend the book for this person, though, because it had been published in 2013 as the first book in a trilogy, and the other books had never come out. Or so I thought. In my desire to do my due diligence, I did a quick search for the book, and found out that Book 2, Dark Fire, had been released last year, and that the third book, Wildwood Rising, came out this year. As the topic of supernatural horror isn't really one that's come up on the podcast before, I reached out to the publisher, and they helped set up an interview with Tim Hall to discuss his decidedly dark and fantastical take on the Robin Hood legends, just in time for Halloween. During the interview, we discuss how the darker elements of world mythology and a trip to South America inspired his books. Also, the malleable nature of Robin Hood, how a character published by DC Comics fits into his vision, and an admirable level of openness regarding a prolonged creative process. So, string your bow and dim the lights as we leave the shelter of the Greenwood for the dangers of the Wildwood with novelist Tim Hall. Hello.
Hello. Hi.
Hi, nice to meet you, Tim. How are you?
Yeah, same to you. Yeah, I'm well, thank you. Yes. How are you?
I'm superb. About to talk about the Robin Hood novels and how it can tie in with the supernatural. My partner's ordering some Thai food for us to have afterwards. I mean, it's just life's good.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Very
How
good.
about you?
Yeah, no, wonderful. Thanks. Yeah, same. I don't often get to talk Robin Hood, especially with someone who knows such a lot about the subject. So yeah, no, I'm embarrassed to say I hadn't heard of your podcast until I got your call, but now I'm delving into it and I'm just loving it. It's fabulous.
Oh, it's superb.
Yeah,
That's wonderful to hear. Glad that you're enjoying it.
I think it's probably great timing. Actually, I think what odd effect of writing three novels with Robin Hood at the center of them, you kind of go off Robin Hood for a bit. I think
Uh-huh.
you're sort of bound to in a way, aren't you? But it wasn't for very long. And now listening to all your things is starting to really re-energize my enthusiasm for it. And I'm remembering how much I love the myths and everything that goes in, everything that it contains, really. Yeah.
Yeah, so I admit I am very curious about what the process was like for you with getting these books out because and I'll get into that in a moment. But first, let's just have some basic introductions. So, you are Tim Hall. You also write under the name TK Hall. You have this trilogy of books called the Blind Bowman series that are about Robin Hood and Marion, but they have a very kind of dark fantasy, supernatural horror tinged element to them. And the most recent of these books, Wildwood Rising, just came out earlier this year. So, but like I was saying, I would like to know a little bit about the process, both in terms of deciding to tie Robin Hood to the supernatural, but also just in terms of getting these books out. Because, like I said, the most recent book just came out this year. I read your first book in this series, though, Shadow of the Wolf, years ago. So I don't know if there's a little bit of drama about how the sausage gets made there or something. But what was the process? What's the backstory? Well, what's going on?
Yeah, no, it is a curious one when you look at the publication dates for sure. I suppose if I was to backtrack to the beginning, as it were, of when the inspiration first came to me, we were doing my wife and I took a sabbatical from my journalism job and we went traveling in South America
Hmm.
and we went into the Amazon rainforest, and that's where, for some reason, all the stories of Robin Hood that I'd known growing up started coming back to me, and found myself in this kind of imaginal Sherwood forest that was kind of dangerous and kind of dark and mysterious the way the Amazon rainforest was.
Yeah,
Um,
much different forest experience than walking around the well-cultivated Sherwood Forest these days, or even the Sherwood Forest of medieval England with its foresters.
yeah, no, that's exactly it, and I think it was always from the beginning. The series was very much inspired by what is nature and what is the forest. What does it mean to us? How do we relate to it? Because I found myself in this place in the Amazon rainforest, and we had these guides that were just kind of from a village. They were just fishermen. They took us into the Amazon rainforest. We didn't even speak a great deal of Spanish, but we went several days into the rainforest, and then we were camping one night, and we woke up in the morning. We came out of our tents. They'd slept in hammocks, and they'd gone. So we were sort of 3 days down the tributaries into the Amazon, and that was, I think, when it struck me that I would not know where to begin surviving in this environment.
Mm.
This is somewhere where I can't navigate, I can't find food, I can't just it was a very threatening place for us coming from where we came from. Our guides came back, so they'd just been out fishing for our breakfast, thankfully. But that was kind of the real core of the thing. That was where it came from, as it were, and that's where I think the sort of horror of it too. It's very much about nature, red in tooth and claw.
Yeah.
What would it really be like to for Robin Hood to survive in this that sort of a wilderness, a wildwood, and
Mm.
therefore then my Robin Hood kind of grew out of that. What sort of a being would he have to be to not only survive there but to thrive there, to fight the sheriff, all the everything else that came with it. So yeah, sorry to sort of answer your question about the publication. That's where it started. I then sat down and I got that when we got back to England. I went back to my journalism job, but I was working on this Shadow of the Wolf, the first book, and that kind of rolled out relatively quickly. And I got an agent and I got a publisher, so it was all rolling along and it was fine. But when Shadow of the Wolf came out, there were lots of things that suddenly seemed to crowd in on me in terms of the sort of psychological pressure of writing. I was an idea that I had to do it again and I had to know what I was doing
Hmm.
now and it had to be as good or better. And it had been published by a very sort of renowned publisher who published people like Philip Pullman. So I felt like I was had to compete with them. And essentially, I lost the psychological battle of writing. And for years, the sequel just got stuck in the mud and didn't go anywhere. And so, yeah, there was then a big, long process of learning to overcome the psychology of creating things when the fear and the pressure and all the rest of it came in. And yeah,
That's
and then eventually I kind of got it unstuck. And the second book, Dark Fire, got made. And then I went straight on to make the third book, Wildwood Rising. But by then, there'd been such a long break that the publishers wanted the whole trilogy finished before they then republished the first
sure.
book and then the second and the third.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that makes sense. Well, congratulations on getting unstuck. Congratulations on getting all three of them out there. I'm really excited to do a reread of Shadow of the Wolf now and pick up Darkfire and the Wildwood Rising books as well. Doing this podcast and all and thinking about Robin Hood a lot for years, and I've kind of made it part of my job to delve into a lot of the different adaptations and really consider them and compare them. And so my list of Robin Hood novels I've read, I just looked at it before starting up this call. It's about 60. But your book really stood out because it is very distinctly different. There's a wide gamut of different sorts of Robin Hood novels out there, things that really delve into nitty-gritty history elements, some that are very juvenile fiction, and some that are romances. Like there's wide spheres, and a few that incorporate fantasy elements as well that can be lots of fun. But yours is the only one I've read that really one, it's the only one where Robin Hood is blind. I feel like that's not much of a spoiler given the name of the series. So there's that, but also like not just having a mystical element in that kind of Robin of Sherwood kind of pagany element, but in a very almost like Evil Dead kind of there are dark ancient forces in the forest. There's some mysterious occult thing going on with the Sheriff of Nottingham, and since I've only read the first book, I don't really know what's going on with that yet. But that there are almost not quite Lovecraftian, but getting into that kind of territory more than the pagan spiritualism you see in other adaptations of Robin Hood that try to lean towards incorporating supernatural elements. And I can really see how the Amazon rainforest would play an element to that because the forest in Shadow of the Wolf really does feel like an extremely dangerous place. Robin's experience trying to survive there, especially after he's been blinded, is harrowing, especially with there being these sorts of supernatural forces there. Do you want to say a little bit more about what inspirations you were drawing on for those kind of supernatural forces aside from the looming presence of the wood?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you. I'm very glad that you think it's got its niche, as it were, in the pantheon of Robin Hood stories. One of the things I've always loved about the old myths, King Arthur, but particularly Robin Hood, but even things like Batman. I've always been fascinated with how malleable they can be and how you
Hmm.
can use, as your podcast as it proves, because it looked at so many different incarnations of Robin Hood. I was fascinated. I don't know where necessarily that came from, but I've always loved the metamorphosis of these characters and how much they can change and still be somehow intrinsically themselves. And so I was interested in a way that if it was sort of something I was playing with, I think I was kind of playing with how much can I change Robin Hood and it still be Robin Hood? What can you take away and still be recognizably the sort of Greenwood legends? I think I came to conclude more than anything that it was the forest for me
Hmm.
was the intrinsic part of Robin Hood that you couldn't take the forest away from him and him still be Robin Hood. And so
Hmm.
somehow they became so synonymous, they became so joined that in Shadow of the Wolf and the future novels, Robin he's essentially kind of becomes the forest.
Yeah.
They're so linked. But I think to answer your question more directly about the kind of more supernatural and horror influences, I think mythology played a big part of that. I've also always loved the North myths, the Norse myths. Sorry, because I love how sort of raw those are, and how Ragnarok, and they don't pull any punches, do they? The Norse myths, they're very very there's the dark forces are always there and are always
Oh yeah.
playing their part too, even
The,
if it's hidden below, and the Greek myths too. The idea that the gods are pulling the strings. But so I think it was kind of classical myth and Norse
yeah.
myth that really brought. Although I have
Nidhogg is
also
always
read.
there chewing the roots of Yggdrasil.
Yes, exactly. Yes, no, exactly. It's in that territory, I think. Although I have definitely loved Lovecraft and uh, that sort of thing as well. I was never big into horror movies until relatively recently. A friend of mine has shown me some horror movies because he feels like I was uneducated in horror movies, so he's sort of given me an education. So there was no kind of direct horror influence, if you know what I mean. But yes,
Right.
I think it's the mythology more than anything, and that felt. The Robin Hood stories for me, the way they've been told in my lifetime at least, or the way they do seem to have gone down quite a soft avenue. I met the great author Philip Pullman relatively recently, and he said something along the lines of, "Oh, what's happened to our Robin Hood stories? What's happened to the Green Man and
Hmm.
all the mythology?" And I tend to, I think I felt that all the hard and dark edges have been taken off, and there's a lot that is really unsettling about the Robin Hood stories, as you know more than most.
They certainly can be, yeah.
So that was it really there, but as I say, it was because where the story started, because it came from my kind of awe and fear of the natural world. Then
Hmm.
actually after we had our travels in South America, we came and settled in a very pastoral and bucolic part of England, in the southwest of England, what people call the Cotswolds, but we're in Gloucestershire, in South Gloucestershire, and we yeah, it's we've got sort of rolling wooded valleys, and it's a very calming and wholesome environment. The people
Yeah,
love to come and walk in.
something that evokes the Shire and Hobbiton from Lord of the Rings. Yeah.
Exactly that. So it's where we are now is very much the Greenwood, and where we were in the Amazon was very much the wildwood. And I feel I think I've often always as a child even I felt this, that nature is these two things. It's red and tooth and claw. It's savage and it's wild and it's dangerous, and it's healing and it's the provider.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that those two elements are always present in the Robin Hood stories, I think, because the forest is always present. But
Yes.
but it's a choice of which way do you go? Do you go, the Disney fox and the brightness and the light and the whimsy, or do you steer to the dark, or is it a mixture of both? I think there's yeah.
Right. One of the ways in which Robin Hood works is there has to be an element of menace, not necessarily for Robin, but for the people that transgress into the forest, for him to be able to be the notorious outlaw, whether or not he's a deadly outlaw, but still dangerous enough to rob them, to force them into his forest feasts, and play tricks upon them. There has to be that element of danger, whether Robin is the cause of the danger or in just part of the forest being representative of the danger and him being sort of an avatar for it.
Yeah, well, no, yeah, that's really interesting. It's always and that I think even in those really whimsical Robin Hood stories, I think I always felt that there was something much more threatening underneath. I don't know why. It's
Well, a point that I've discussed a few times when I've been invited onto things like the Dream Swarm podcast is, people look to make a connection between, say, Robin Goodfellow and Robin Hood, and there isn't really any direct connection there other than the name. But Robin Hood can serve the function that the fair folk serve. The idea that there are these wild, kind of slightly dangerous, not quite civilized things in the forest, and you might fall prey to their tricks. Again, to make the Tolkien reference, because Tolkien was pulling off of the fairy tales in The Hobbit, when the dwarves are in Mirkwood and they're seeing these forest feasts that they're trying to go to, and that's very much playing from real folklore. But this idea of getting invited to fairy feasts, losing track of time, losing, your valuables more than just your coin purse, and Robin Hood can be that figure. And one of the things with the folklore and the fairy tales is the way to survive them is to be honest, be courteous. And that's what you also have to do with Robin Hood in the old stories. If you are honest about how much you have in your purse, if you are courteous to him, if you are goodly, if you're just an honest person, then you end up just having a good time and getting to go home. And it's similar with the fairy tale. So even though there's not a magic supernatural element, he's still serving the same role as something that we view as strange and mysterious and magical.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I'd not thought of it like that. That's so I suppose part of what I'm talking about then is a choice between fairy tale and myth, perhaps, because
Hmm.
mythology is much harder and more
Yeah.
and less
He's not inviting people in for feasts in your stories.
no, he's not. But even that, I find that idea, inviting people in for feasts. I always my mind always went to the cannibalism bizarrely there. I think I don't know if it's I feel like I suppose it is in the nature of fairy tales too, isn't it? That there's euphemism going on a lot. So stories about they do think that a lot of them came from times
Hmm.
of actual cannibalism. The so I suppose that does explain why there's often a feeling of unease. There's something darker underneath.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
with
Always some
mythology,
level
I
of
think
menace.
there's
I mean, and Robin Hood, even in, again, the like classic lighthearted stories, he's feeding people poached venison, poached as in hunted illegally, which means that you are basically accepting a potential death sentence by
mm,
eating this meat that is forced upon you. It's much like with the cannibalism element, they're still playing with this idea of taboo and danger.
yeah, no, that's it. Yeah, it's a fascinating thing, and I think the other thing, the very word outlaw, civilization and law are so synonymous. It's so much what how we build civilization. So the very fact of being an outlaw, it puts us in many ways it puts them in the realm of the animal and the savage. So I feel like there's again whenever I've read about the outlaws living in the forest, they have their own codes, of course, often, but
Hmm.
there is always a sense that, in actual fact, there's something much more primal going on there,
Yeah.
and those elements certainly seem to come out in my stories anyway.
Yes.
But
Yeah. The primal elements,
yeah,
it's there's a lot of like old gods feeling, the a little like Princess Mononoke, a little old gods of
mm,
Appalachia, like these very like there are dark, mysterious, very ancient forces that are just beyond the ken of human beings, and the fact that Robin Hood kind of taps into them seems to be driving him to be this connection between the human world and the natural world. And
yeah, that's a really one.
what he really kind of reminds me of is Swamp Thing from the DC comics.
Well, I'm very glad you said that because that's my favorite comic book series. The Alan Moore take on Swamp Thing is my all-time favorite comic book series, and I read that series probably once a year. So, and actually, it wasn't. It's not even unconscious. He was a big kind of direct influence, the Swamp Thing, because yeah, no, that's right. The Swamp Thing is the swamp. It really,
Hmm.
he to the degree that he can control it, and so yeah, so my Robin Hood was very much in that vein that you the swamp or in my case the forest was center stage, is center stage. It's not a backdrop. The forest is under threat. The forest is transformative. The forest is the thing that in many ways drives the story, that shapes the story.
Hmm. Yeah, it
And
needs to be preserved, but also it's really dangerous all on its own.
yeah, no, exactly. So yes, that's exactly that. So those twin forces, as it were, the light and the dark. I think I've always been interested in where those two come together and what happens. And so yeah, so for and as you say, the that sort of just beyond the human ken feeling. If ever I was really enjoying writing these books, it was when the vixen goddess was on stage
Hmm.
because I never knew what she was going to say or do. She she has some kind of law of her own, but I still don't know what it is. And she therefore is kind of chaos. She just stirs things up, and she's playing games of a sort that mean something to her and really cause trouble for other people. But that's the kind of element I think I was trying to draw from the myths, the idea that we can't always, a lot of our. I was listening to a podcast the other day that was talking about a lot of the mythological stories that Christianity adopted. Christianity then made them very took the hard edges off and made it so that you could understand there's a sort of logical cause and effect. But
It-
the but,
it-
the, but the
yeah,
old
to turn
sources
them
they
into
came from,
allegorical moral tales.
yeah, no, exactly that. And they made sense, as it were. But the sources of those tales were very much stranger, and it makes sense to us on a really deep level. That's the beauty of the archetypal,
Hmm.
uh, the kind of forms I hope I was using in this book at times is that it makes sense on some level, but it's not. You're not going to work it out logically what the vixen goddess is up to.
Yeah.
She's playing her own game in the way that I
Yeah,
think we probably said.
motivations feel very non-human. Yeah.
Yeah, no, exactly that, and yeah, and again, that's a meeting. Nature is very unhuman. We particularly now, and I think that's the other wonderful thing about Robin Hood stories is I think you get because they're so malleable, you get the Robin Hood you need,
Hmm. Yeah.
the Robin Hood that is useful to you as a for the stories that are pertinent at the time. And so
Hmm.
obviously you had things like the Howard Pyle books, didn't you, when the very industrial backdrop in England, and so then the Romanticism came in, and the Merry Greenwood,
Yeah. Yeah.
and so we're using these stories to make sense of where we are as people, and it's at the moment we are so disconnected from nature that
Mhm.
it doesn't surprise me that in these stories that I've written there's a big gap between what the human beings know and what's really happening.
Yeah. No, I think that's really spot on a lot of levels, both in terms of their feeling like the gap between our like our connection with the natural world has never felt farther away. This is something that people talk about a lot. People living in cities, just how much we're divorced from the natural world. This is something I've thought about a lot working in planetariums and the number of times I have brought school kids into a planetarium, brought up the night sky on the dome, and gotten these oohs and ahs And it's because we're digitally showing them a night sky that's been denied to them their whole lives. Because most of us live in this world where we're surrounded by light pollution and we can only see the very brightest stars and maybe Jupiter and Saturn on occasion, Venus as the evening star there, just like a handful for most of our lives these days. And they're out there. Don't even have to go that far out from where we live to see the actual night sky. But most of us don't. We're just really disconnected from that world that is our actual world that we're in.
Yeah, no, that's yeah, it is a shame, and it has a real consequence, doesn't it? We, as you say, looking up at the night stars, at the night sky, that the awe that we get from that, it does reconnect us with life. And
Hmm.
I feel like going into a place like the Amazon rainforest, or even a walk in your local woods or park, if there is a reconnection that happens. It's
Yeah.
my daughters and I, we spent the day today in the arboretum near us because they're on half-term holidays, and the all the maple, the Japanese maple trees and the acers are full of this fiery red color and oranges and yellows, and as young as they are, my daughters would just reacted to it in such a wonderfully organic and wholesome way. They love being there and they love climbing trees. You know, they're
Yeah.
immediately we just we but that's the healing side. You know, all this forest bathing idea that nature is a real healer. It is like nothing else for putting us back
Hmm.
together and making us ourselves again. And at the
There.
same time, it will destroy us all. So
Yes.
so these are the this is the this is the mythological tension, I think, that I think
Hmm.
yeah, that I think was being borne out in these books,
Yeah.
because yeah, it shocks me a bit when I go back and, well, people say to me, you know, well, wow, those books are dark, and they are, and I didn't necessarily mean for them to be in such a, but once I started going down that route, Robin being blind, I think it was because of this disconnection, because I found myself in this primal wilderness of the Amazon, and I could not connect to it on any sort of level. I didn't recognize any of it. It was all so all the calls of the howler monkeys coming from miles away, and all these echoes and all these sights that I couldn't, you know, disguised snakes and everything was camouflaged. It didn't actually make any sense to my senses really. And the idea and finding myself somewhere like that, when Sherwood started to merge with this in my imagination, it made sense to me that Robin would have to know that environment in a different way to how we normally know it. Because and it gives me as well when you say about, you know, you showing children the stars in a planetarium. You know, we're so used to we're watching everything in a flat way. We're watching everything is tele-reality. We're watching nature documentaries, and there's some kind of vicarious
Yeah.
experience of nature all the time.
Hmm.
If you really come up against nature, it's in all your senses. You know, we were covered in mosquitoes where we would it was, you know, the temperature was like a weight. It was we were viscerally there.
Yeah.
And so I think Robin is blind because conversely that allows him to reconnect with the world that he's in.
Hmm.
All the rest of him has to yeah,
Yes.
he's not looking at this place from afar. He's immersed in it 100%, and he becomes it.
Yes, yes. So to spoil how he compensates for being blind is by not seeing through exactly nature, but experiencing the world through like having not exactly become one with nature, but more in tune with nature and the natural world, and being able to I think the easiest analogy is the spider that is in a web and can feel the vibrations, that resonance, and just feeling it throughout, the rustling of leaves, the stepping on grass, the way that crickets will bounce away from somebody's footfall, and the way the wind will move around a person when they're present, and just like those little changes in the environment is what he is in tune to, and still lets him be the heroic figure that he is, despite the blindness, but in a very supernatural, still sort of way that feels very connected, very similar to the Alan Moore Swamp Thing and being connected to the green for anybody who is familiar with those comics.
Yeah, no, well, yeah. So that's exactly it, and yeah, those resonances that are rippling through everything all the time. That I think we've kind of not to go overboard about it, but I think we've kind of numbed ourselves to so much of nature. We go outside if it's a little bit cold, if it's a little bit rainy or cold, we'll stay indoors.
Hmm.
Um, so I feel like yeah, I think that a lot of it was very much about that, about what is nature and what's our connection to it. But at the same time, then, as I say, once I'd opened those floodgates in a way, the and it was an invitation to all the darker sides of of my subconscious, I guess. And Robin had very quickly transformed into this. Well, he wields this bow of pure shadow that kind of kills through pure fear,
Hmm.
and and yeah, and
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
that
He is
sort
he
of
is the hero, but he is a terrifying figure of a hero. Yeah.
yeah, no, yeah, yes, exactly. He's as much monster as he is hero, but and he is kind of battling those more destructive elements that are in him. His those savage nature, red in tooth and claw. He is the destroyer, but he's trying throughout that first book anyway to kind of reclaim his humanity and to stay on the right side of civilization, if you like,
Hmm. Hmm.
or certainly yeah, he late in the later books he starts to merge with nature more to the degree where he starts to become perhaps something more godlike, I suppose. But
Yeah.
don't want to
So,
spoil too much.
again, at least in the first book, while Robin is going undergoing this sort of transformation and both surviving and embracing simultaneously the dangerous natural world in which he has found himself, Marion is a huge part of the book, and she is surviving an also extremely dangerous, bleak, and terrifying world, but the one that is made by men. What was the thought process that went into the really deep connection that you put between Robin and Marion and sort of her journey that she's on?
Yeah, I again like with the writing of the victim goddess. I think Marion was really good fun to write, or I really enjoyed writing her because she is kind of ruthless and resourceful, and she in many ways drives the plot. But
Hmm.
but she is also kind of whereas Robin is going on this kind of mystical journey. Even in the first book, he's starting to merge with the forest and become something more than human. Marion is very much the human. She's the grounded,
Hmm.
uh, very material, pragmatic. And so she's in many ways she's kind of Robin's mirror, but they do. I don't know if there's any way to say this is not cheesy, but they do complete each other in that they are the opposites, and I think it's
Hmm.
yeah, I won't. I can psychoanalyze myself to see to find why Marion is quite right. She is, but I think she is. Yeah, she's the capable one. Really, she's the one who does know what's going on, at least in a human way, and she's willing to put the rest aside in order to deal with what's in front of her. And without her, the story I don't think could work because she's the one who is dealing with the real world, while Robin's off
Yeah.
fighting his demons, as it were. And especially in later books, actually, when Robin goes more and more towards he goes off into odd realms, let's say, or weird realms. Then Marion is the one who kind of holds everything together until later, until they both go through a transformation, let's say, but Marion's is to begin with, she's much more material and down to earth and grounded. But yeah, I know not everybody likes her in these books by any means. I can appreciate that because she's quite she's quite uncompromising, should we say?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I rather appreciated her as a character that could give John McClane lessons in, how to have resolve.
Yeah, no, yeah, she would. Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think there was a part again. We get hopefully these Robin Hood stories. They do evolve, and they and I think you don't have to look too far back at Robin Hood stories for Maid Marian to be a damsel in distress, and there's something that it doesn't that needs updating there for sure. So I think. Many ways my Marin has perhaps overcompensated, but she's certainly not a damsel in distress.
Well, the earliest Marion-centric ballad involves her beating Robin in a sword fight, so
Yeah, right.
she's
Yeah,
always
right.
she's always had some chops.
Yeah. It's true. It's true. It's true. Yeah. No, it's interesting. I understand she wasn't even a part of the myths or the folklore for quite some time.
Yeah, no, she does not appear in the existing medieval ballads that we have. The play fragment and medieval poems that come down to us, there is no love interest. It's not until the Renaissance, the 1500s, that you start seeing something built in, probably coming in through the May games and there being an association with
Right.
Robin taking the place of the Lord of Misrule and this like Marion stock figure getting connected, but also plays during the Elizabethan period, drawing upon an historical figure named Matilda Fitzwalter and her being the love interest in the plays by Anthony Munday. So like she gets incorporated, hundreds of years ago,
Yeah. Yeah.
but after people had already been telling tales about Robin Hood.
Yeah, no, it's interesting, isn't it? Because now I feel like now it's difficult to tell a Robin Hood story without Marion. I mean, she is such a integral part of the myths. It's odd to think that at one stage she wasn't in there,
Hmm.
but I think yeah, I certainly enjoyed her involvement in the story.
Yeah.
Um,
And it for as much and as you say, it kind of like lets you have somebody that's helping kind of drive the plot because they're interacting with the human elements, and for as frightening and terrifying as the wilderness is, it's part of what makes it frightening and terrifying is its indifference towards humanity. So while there is a man versus nature element, there is also real avarice and greed in the form of some of the human characters, like your take on the Sheriff of Nottingham.
yeah, yeah, no, absolutely, and in the second book, Guy of Gisborne, because he always, from the traditional stories, just a description of him wearing a horse's hide, that always just chilled me. It just sounded so bizarre and unnecessary. But so no, he grew into something really quite evil, I suppose, is the only word that comes to mind. Yes, it's the human involvement through the sheriff. I wanted the sheriff and Guy of Gisborne to be involved in that supernatural side of things, as it were. They are also driven by their fear of nature. I think that's a large part of it. I think whenever I read back about the burning of the groves and the deliberate cutting, destruction of the pagan sites, anything like that. There was a very deliberate stamping
Hmm.
on the places of pagan worship, and that was always going to be a big part of the story. So the sheriff, for me, I wanted him to stand for that as a kind of an archetype, as it were. So I didn't get too historical about who the sheriff was and that sort of thing. But I think that in a way would have been, yeah, shoehorning it in a little bit too much to what is essentially a fantasy story.
Yeah, yeah. I would definitely say that the fantasy is what comes through. There's I remember reading that first book. As I said, it was a few years ago, but my takeaway was, oh, this is a fantasy novel that utilizes Robin and Marion and some of these kind of characters and tropes and ideas built up from that legendarium, but it is a fantasy novel. This is a wild, dark fantasy version of medieval England, not a historically accurate medieval England that
Yeah.
happens to have ancient gods, roaming its forests.
Yeah, no, that's exactly it. Obviously, it's if only. Yeah, I appreciate your reading because you can put it in its place, as it were, and that's one of the difficulties of doing stories like this. That people will bring their own stuff to it even more than they do to any other novel,
Hmm.
and some people have really appreciated it for it being different, and other people have wanted to know where Friar Tuck is. And he almost made it in a couple of times, but kept getting written out. I think he's just too jovial.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I mean, yeah, like you shouldn't shoehorn the character in if it just doesn't fit. And that's
yeah,
one of the things about all of the adaptations out there. There's so many adaptations, and there's always somebody who's not getting included. There's always somebody that's left by the wayside or just gets a cameo appearance. Even television shows with multiple seasons, there will be characters that just don't fit in that world, and trying to
yeah,
force them to is just doing everybody a disservice, including those characters.
yeah. No, I think that's exactly right. And the thing is, you've got such a roster to choose from as well, haven't you? And they're all like Alan A. Dale, for instance. I would have really liked to have got in. And again, a couple of times he was in there and he wasn't working, so he went back out again. And
Hmm.
but yeah, maybe I'll revisit and do some short stories with some of these other characters in because I do enjoy them for their own.
Yeah,
What,
so that was one of the questions I wanted to ask before we wrapped up. Are there future plans? Will you be doing anything more in this world?
I could definitely imagine revisiting it at some point. Yeah, as I say, I think got to the end of it because it was had a bit of a tortured production history. I got to the end and kind of wanted to turn away from it for a while. So I'm deep into writing something really quite different at the moment. It's a sort of fantasy sci-fi
Hmm.
parable, maybe. So that's not too boring a word, but it's again it's got similar sort of themes, I suppose, environmental kind of asking similar questions about where we are in the world and how we're relating to nature. But so for now, that's getting my kind of full attention. But as I say, I only when I revisited now discovered your podcast, it is really reminding me just how much I love these legends. They are endlessly fascinating, and there's just such richness there, isn't there?
Yeah.
So many ways you can look at them, and so
Hmm.
yeah, I could definitely imagine some short stories for sure. But I don't think I'll be doing any more novels on it. I think that the third novel did seem to complete the set. So
Okay, good, good. In terms of the figure of Robin Hood, how did you come to him as a young person? What was your relationship growing up with Robin Hood? What adaptations were the ones that most stuck with you?
I think, do you know what? I think Prince of Thieves was quite a big thing for me. I know. I think you're just about to get to that by the looks of it,
Yeah,
aren't you?
yeah, we've recorded the episode. It's yet to
Ah,
be
brilliant.
released. Yep.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, I was quite an impressionable age when Prince of Thieves came out. So I remember the music video first, I suppose. It was and just yeah, it was very big Hollywood, impressionable age. So that was quite a thing for me. But again, it looked very soft, and so then I
Hmm.
suppose that the other TV one would have been Robin of Sherwood,
Yeah.
which I barely remember, but I remember this sort of atmosphere.
Hmm.
Yeah, so that was the early, and then over the years they were just reading things like Howard Pyle's version and various other novels and things. But I was in no means well versed on the Robin Hood legends, except to say that they are, I think, in the atmosphere somehow in England. They're just, along with King Arthur, they are,
Yeah.
whether you're aware of it or not, they are part of our. It's in the
Hmm.
stones, really.
Yes.
So
Yes.
so I think that in a way that's what it feels like. That I rather than any specific version. It was just the idea of this is the legendary territory we've got, the
Hmm.
landscape.
Yeah. Yeah, very much. That's a subject that I'm hoping to explore in some depth next year. With the idea, I've brought up Tolkien a couple of times already, and there's so much this idea that through the Lord of the Rings, he was trying to kind of create this sort of mythical past for Britain, and how much and what we're going to explore with a bunch of Tolkien scholars and medievalists is how much Robin Hood is infused in there, how much it is in the bones, in the trees, in the roots of Britain. So, how, if you're making a mythical history of Britain, how much of Robin Hood kind of has to be there, and what ways does it manifest in his work?
Oh, that sounds brilliant. I'll be tuning into those. That sounds really interesting. Yeah,
Yeah,
I think
little
that's
tease for next year.
that's great. It's great. It's because it's really hard to say how that those stories are being handed down almost as well, but they somehow they are. They're all there.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah, and that's I think ultimately one of the reasons why I love Robin Hood and studying him is because it is just there. There's
mm,
no
mm.
canonical Robin Hood. There's no authorial like, oh, you can point to this guy. He's the one that made up Robin Hood. This is the origin point. The first thing we know about Robin Hood stories is that people were telling them by 1377 because there's people making references to them. What stories they were even telling, we don't know. We don't have any that are written down for almost 100 years later. We just know that they were.
Yeah, wow.
And there's
Yeah,
something beautiful about that.
yeah, there is. Yeah, that's wonderful, isn't it? Yeah, I remember reading what's the Robin Hood often popped up in official documents, particularly kind of court documents, if
Hmm.
almost like a John Smith sort of.
Yeah. Yeah. There's many court cases coming up before we have literary reference of somebody who is named Robin Hood, or they have like the word Robin Hood, or like a variation of it, like Rob Hood or something like that, that is put kind of after their name, and it seems to be some sort of synonym for a criminal. Yeah.
Wow.
And we don't know
No,
if
no.
that's because it was inspired by an actual person, or if it was just a nickname like a John Smith. We
Yeah,
don't know.
yeah, and that's great. Yeah, that don't know. There's nothing more intriguing and enticing than that. I love that space of don't know.
Yeah.
Like you say, it's in the ether then, isn't it? That's great.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. Just yesterday, I was having a conversation with a gaming group that I'm in, and they hadn't realized they did this podcast, and it came up somehow, and they were like, "Oh my goodness, so Robin Hood was real, right?" And because that's always the first question, some variation of that. And the answer to that is, of course, not as satisfying as anybody wants it to be, but far more fascinating.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. Yeah, it's a wonderful territory you're exploring for sure.
Hmm. It is. All right. Well, I should probably let you go. I really appreciate you taking some time on your Monday evening to have the chat. Like I said, I'm looking forward to getting my hands on the complete set now that it's all out. Congratulations again on making that happen, and best of luck with your new novel that you're working on.
Yeah, thank you. Well, thanks for your interest. I'm really glad to hear that Shadow of the Wolf was, as I say, worked for you, and that you're interested in the other two. And yeah, and thanks for the podcast. I think it's a wonderful exploration of just a fascinating subject. So yeah, I will be tuning in from now on for sure.
Absolutely. Fantastic. Glad to hear it. Take care, Tim. Don't be a stranger in the Greenwood.
Yeah, yeah, a pleasure. Thanks very much.
Yep. Good night.
Bye.
My thanks again to Tim for joining me to discuss his process for bringing a darkly fantastical take on Robin Hood to life. If you'd like to learn more about Tim's books, there's a link to his website in the episode description. Or you can do a search for the Blind Bowman Trilogy. If you'd like a take on Robin Hood that incorporates the fantastical and that doesn't shy away from darkness, but without quite tipping into horror, you might enjoy The Books of the Wood by J. Tullis Hennig, who was my guest back on episode 31 of the podcast. If you've read either of those series, or have another spooky take on Robin Hood, and you'd like to share your thoughts, then you can find us on Blue Sky, Threads, Instagram, and Facebook, all with the handle @intogreenwood. Or you can email us directly using intogreenwood@gmail.com. There's also a Robin Hood-centric Discord server, the one that I mentioned during the introduction. Over there, we play games, share photos, organize watch parties, and run a book club. As of this recording, we're finishing up our current read, which is In a Dark Wood by Michael Cadnam. Just reach out one of the methods mentioned above if you'd like an invitation. Another location where you can find all sorts of bonus content is on patreon.com/intogreenwood. Please check out our various reward tiers, where you too can be a stout yeoman for a mere $1 a month and do so much towards helping us keep the lights on here in the Greenwood. If you'd like to show your support and appreciation, but aren't so sure about committing to a recurring donation, we also have an account at buymeacoffee.com/intogreenwood, where you can leave a simple tip in increments of $3 or so. If you'd like to support the show and get a Robin Hood themed sticker, mug, magnet, or t-shirt, then you can visit our brand new Dashery shop at into-the-greenwood.dashery.com. There will, of course, be a link in the episode description as well. There's a few really fun designs there, including a new Robin Hood-styled version of a pirate flag, designed by webcomic artist Marianne Rose Papke of silverkraken.com. Each and every dollar we raise means so much, as my financial situation is just a little less steady than I'd like. Although we do remain committed to partnering with top-rated charities such as Trees, Water, and People, with whom we always give 10% of any and all earnings. You can find a link in the episode description if you'd like to find out more about their work, and maybe make a donation to them directly. Of course, non-monetary support is also extremely valuable. As a small independent podcast, every single rating, review, or share makes a huge impact, both in terms of growing our audience and in terms of letting us know that all the work going into its creation is being appreciated. Into the Greenwood is produced and edited by me, Thaddeus Papke. Our theme music is by Plastic 3. No portion of this podcast has been created with the use of generative AI. That's all for now, though. So once again, I find myself wishing you all spooky travels until our next journey together into the wildwood.